there's my drum set. And the drum set is a drum set. Hello. Who here has seen Hainbach's video on the topic of islands for music making? It's an idea that centers around, sort of like setups where if you have a lot of equipment, it can be really challenging to parse all of it in one setting and to figure out how all of those things relate to each other. In this case, I own a lot of instruments. I've been sort of collecting things over a really long time. And sort of more importantly than collecting the physical objects, I've been collecting knowledge and experience related to each of those objects over time. And the trick when I'm improvising is, what is the most effective way that I can be able to interact with this object in a very sort of like off-the-cuff manner and get the most out of it and have it have the most effective relationships between other things. I went through a long time with my setup where I wanted to have this sort of like a matrix on a modular synthesizer where every object in it can be connected to any other object. And I found over time that just caused too many problems. It was almost too much to think about, and I spent more time worrying about routing and worrying about establishing relationships between instruments and effects and such than making music and making sounds. A really good example of that is the Chaos Pad. I'm fairly confident that anyone here knows what a Chaos Pad is. This is a KP2 Chaos Pad, and this is the third one that I've owned. And the reason for that is I had one with a band that I was in college. We used it extensively for all kinds of different effects. And I learned so much about how to use this device. And when I stopped playing with that band, I sold my Chaos Pad. And my hands and my brain kept wanting to use that invested knowledge in the Chaos Pad and not having the tool available. And so I finally bought another one. And then I went through a thing again where I was like, I should just get rid of stuff I'm not using that often. And here I am with my third one. And I realized that my invested time and knowledge was more important than having the newest piece of gear or the newest version of something. And so specifically, people talking about having the KP3, the KP2. KP3 is a great piece of gear. The KP2 is so specific to what I have done in the past, and I find that for me, that knowledge is more important than additional features or additional effects. So currently, I also realize that the way that I've used the KP2 in the past largely is with vocals, and so it's currently in my vocal chain. The thing that sort of made it all come together, I used to have like a mixer, and then like something like the Chaos Pad would be on an effects chain, and so I could assign anything to it. And I also had like a guitar pedal board, and my guitar, instead of having my guitar running directly through it, I would have that on an effects chain, so I could run an aux from the mixer into that and put anything through it. And I love being able to run my voice through like guitar pedals, but it was so many things to have to think about all the time that I was just making less music and doing more fiddling and trying to make things work. Eventually, I want to say a year or two ago now, Hainbach made a great video. I assume everybody knows who Hainbach is. Great YouTuber. I'm going to link the video in the description, which you should watch after this if you haven't seen it already. In it, he discusses the islands concept is essentially a way to take a ton of gear, trim it down into smaller sets that sort of live together and become a relation. They become like collectively become an instrument. That was sort of mind-blowing to me, because it's like I always want to have the infinite quality of being able to connect anything to anything, but that's just not realistic if you want to actually be creative on a regular basis. And it doesn't mean you can't break those relationships up if you want to achieve a specific thing, especially if you're doing like studio kind of work. But in a setting like this, where I'm trying to do things on the fly, it just makes so much sense. And it was really, really game-changing for me. And so what I want to do is run you through the islands that I've built in my setup. And the way that I have it built, you can't necessarily like recognize what they are or where they are, because they kind of overlap for camera visibility reasons, right? And things like that. So, and sort of give my justifications for why I've made certain choices, put certain effects with certain things, finding those relationships that make a lot of sense and sort of locking into them. This setup here is one of those setups, and it's sort of my vocal island. Islands are groups of tools. Islands are groups of tools, essentially, yes. Groups of tools that develop a specific relationship. So here is my Nord Electro, and obviously it's my electric piano. When I started streaming, I was doing a lot more song playing, and appliances are gone berserk, and I was doing a lot of standing at the piano and singing. And so this relationship was very natural. So this came about as a comfortable setup. But another thing that I do a lot is playing the Ondes Martenot and doubling it with my voice. So this relationship, the physical relationship between these two items, came about that way. It's not an accident, and it's not just the best way it fit. In fact, it was really difficult to get the Ondomo to sit right here. This keyboard stand is like a 3-tier keyboard stand, and the Ondes Martenot, this Ondomo, does not sit on a flat surface, and I actually had to build, I'll show you, I had to build a special wooden platform that it sits on so that it can sit flat. And these pieces of extra wood like hold it up so it sits flat. And I take this to shows too, so you can see my like name and phone number, which I guess is now public knowledge or written on there. So that's where this relationship came from. My voice runs through effects. Like I mentioned, it runs through the Chaos Pad, but it also runs through a Line 6 DL4 looper. And that allows me to do all kinds of fun, sort of like looping effects with my voice off the cuff that are not synced to my 505. And you'll notice I didn't start with the 505. The 505 is obviously a very key, like central part of the setup, but it's not actually sort of like where my setup starts musically. And having this looper allows me to make stuff that's like more ethereal and sort of out there. But it's also, like I talked about the Chaos Pad, it's a piece of gear that I've owned more than once because I buy it, I use it for a long time, I get extremely comfortable with it, I know it inside and out. Here's the DL4 that's on my voice, which, like I said, I can loop on here. It's pretty much always set to the loop sampler setting, and that's just kind of how I ust it all the time. Sometimes I'll turn the echo up a little bit. Well, you'll notice I also have a DL4, but it's the DL4 Mark II over here on the guitar pedal board. And again, and in this particular case, I don't know if anyone else has gone up to the Mark II. It really is the DL4, but it's smaller and has new features, and otherwise, but it functions exactly the same as the old one, which is why all of my institutional knowledge on the old one applied to this one, and it made sense to pick it up. which normally I would avoid upgrading for no good reason. So there's the Chaos Pad, which can also record its own loops on the voice. And, you have... no, don't do that. You can record loops. Then it'll replay them back, and then there's a play. Where is it? And then additional to that, down here, and you can barely see it, but this is one of those Behringer foot controllers, which is set up to control the 505. But on this end of it, I would cut it here in terms of my islands, because these two things here, this one controls a tap tempo echo on my microphone. And this one controls the reverb level, but I have it overridden right now, so that doesn't do anything. There's still more aspects of this island, though. Like I said, this is sort of like a core one, and this relationship is so important. There's a dark world reverb for the Ondes Martenot, which I picked. Actually, it's time to focus on the Ondes Martenot for a bit. So I'll digress a little bit and get a little deeper into this instrument, since I won't get to cover it separately. But the Ondes Martenot is an early 20th century French electronic instrument. It predates the theremin ever so slightly, but they're effectively contemporaries. It is a monophonic synthesizer that has a variety of waveforms. Sawtooth, no, don't do that, please. Come on. Square wave. And there's a sine wave in here. And there's a few variations of like different pulse things and like variable. There's like a variable wave that I can control. Yes, the foot controls. I'm going to go through that as we go through them. Because this foot controller is very central to a lot of things that are going on, but there's more that connects that to the other side. So the thing that makes it unique is the Ruban, the ring controller, which allows me to control the pitch fluidly like I would on a wind or string instrument, but it is such a unique sound. The thing that I also can play it with the keyboard. But whether you're playing it with the ring or the keyboard, the volume is controlled by this button here. And the harder you press it, the louder the sound is. So this is like bow pressure and wind pressure. So it is a synthesizer, but the control mechanism is so human that it really stands out sonically. Now, there's all kinds of stuff going on here on the drawer with little trill buttons. And there's also 4 separate outputs on here. And with this setup, I only use the one output to the dark world and then goes into the system. But with my band that I play with, I run 2 different channels into an Empress Zoya that I can program different effects, and I can turn, there's like a little mixer on here, and you can turn different channels up. And so I can interact with the different effects in different ways. And the reason for that is that traditionally the Ondes Martenot is run through a set of unique speakers. And each speaker is built in a way mechanically that is different. So a famous one is the Metallique, which is a gong, very similar to this one, that actually operates as the speaker cone that's mechanically vibrated by the speaker coil. And so it adds a metallic resonance to the sound. Another one is the Palme, which is a sort of like leaf-shaped 24-string, 12-string guitar sort of thing, that the bridge of the guitar, of the stringed instrument, is vibrated by the output from this. And so you can tune those to whatever resonances you want. It's wild. I don't have any of those things, but what I do have is Dark World, and Dark World has enough varieties of reverb and different things that I can get to not necessarily simulate those pedals, but to give me sort of different kinds of ambiance that I want and adjust it very quickly on the fly. The last piece of this island is an extension of the microphone, which is wind instruments and small hand percussion instruments. Underneath here you can't really see it from this camera, is a shelf, which is actually just an old pedal board that I built. And half of it is actually a different island. We're not going to talk about that yet. But the other half has recorders and weird stuff and other weird stuff and Christmas and one of my favorites, the bass harmonica. And keeping all this stuff here, it's kind of just logical, right? I've talked at one point about building like a shelf up here that I could hide some of those instruments in, but you know, we also have the automaton and stuff like this. This is kind of just a logistical choice though. The automaton, which I play through the microphone, I have a tenor recorder here as well, and just other small instruments that this is just the way that I have to interact with them. But there's a secret final island, which I'll come back to with that. So keep that stuff in mind. There's like a secret final island at the end. Secrets. The next, sort of like the number 2 island, is this table over here. This table is, in some ways, it's really, so like, I think it seems like it's like the brain center of the setup, but it's really not. The 505 in some ways is, and again, most people watching this are familiar with the 505, but really briefly, since this is a talk that will continue to exist, each of these 5 channels is its own looper. And you can record in time. You only get to go to the secret final island if you get all the legendary MacGuffins before the final boss. That's true. That's true. But I promise I will include a completionist's guide. Anyway, this can do all kinds of stuff. You can play channels backwards, yada, yada. We don't have to get into the details of how the 505 works, but I will show you that my routing on the back of the 505 is a little nuts. I have almost every plug used on the back of the 505 at this point. My microphone actually uses both of the microphone channels so that I can use the preamp on the 505 and then loop back into the 505 on a different channel. One input is recorded and the other one is not. And that's to get the effects. That's to make it possible for me to use the looper on the floor. But if I record into the 505, it doesn't pick up that sound. But if I record into the 505, it doesn't pick up that sound. But if I record, so it's a little weird. But the location of the 505 is really one more of convenience rather than like being in a core spot. This island over here is sort of the synthesis island, and I have my Nord Lead 3. Again, a synthesizer that is much maligned online, but again, I'm really comfortable with it. I've had it since the early 2000s. I know it super, super well, and I actually, the way that I play it live on stream, I always start with an init patch, and I design patches from nothing each time. And sometimes that results in like really obvious patches, but often it means that I can kind of go in different directions, which I enjoy. It runs through a Space Echo pedal, which is just out of frame. And that's it. That's it for it. And then I have the RD09, the RD9, which is my drum machine, and the drum machine does not run, it runs through the 505, but it is not recorded by the 505, so it just runs on clock. You get the gist. Thanks for the bit. You see that? I got one shot out of the Percy's for one bit. But the purpose of these being together... Oh, and sorry, the drum machine also runs through my model FET as well as a Boss reverb, an RV6. Is it the 6? No, it's the 5. It's the RV5. The RV6 is down here. And this sort of coexists with... They're not plugged into each other per se, but I interact with them together often because if I'm... They're in close proximity because I'm often programming the drums and wanting to play synthesizer parts at the same time. And that's an area where I'll sort of build like a bed of sound underneath other things that I'm going to do. I do also like take keyboard solos and stuff, but like I'll often be making an arpeggiator sequence or a chord sequence or a bass line on the synthesizer that is meant to go with what I'm programming on the drum machine. And so having them in close proximity means that I'm sort of working with them simultaneously and making those sounds at the same time. They're actually sitting on this old drawing desk, which was like sort of a nightmare to figure out what the right piece of table for that was. But I have to go under here periodically and like tighten all the bolts because it will threaten to just tip off and throw the whole thing on the ground. Now, it does sort of, so that's island number 2. And it's actually pretty simple, right? It's like, it's a synth thing and it runs through an effect. But the important part is that they're intentionally put together because of the musical decisions that it allows me to make. So there is my guitar pedal board. And it on its own is sort of an island. It along with the guitar, which of course is stored on the other side of the room. I have a couple different guitars that I sometimes switch between. But the general gist is, I mean, I don't know. It's a guitar pedal board. Like, there isn't that much to say about it. But its proximity here is intentional. I will stand here and play guitar while I'm doing the drum programming. I do want to be able to do that. But for anyone that's wondering, I'll just rattle it off real quick. I have a Ernie Ball Jr. volume pedal. Actually, before that is an SP compressor that goes into the volume pedal. And then it goes through an Oxford drive, a Black Mass 1312. There's a Mini Glitch, which is made by the same folks that make the Oxford drive, and then it goes into a Grand Orbiter, a Boss PS3, and finally into the DL4 Mark II, which I do use both as a delay, often as a tap tempo delay, and as not that. We don't have to spend a ton of time on that. Everybody knows how a guitar pedal board works. And I also do have a bass guitar. I wouldn't call it part of an island. It's kind of a floater. It just kind of hangs out. It's just a guy. It has like a DI. I don't run it through effects or anything really. It just... Not bad, not bad. So that's that. This is this part of it here. There's one extension, there's an additional island here, and this island actually extends into this part of the room. Minus the guitars. Right here is my glockenspiel and my toy piano. These have developed a relationship for me over the years because I built this setup when I was playing in a folk band, like multi-instrumentalist, like folk chamber rock sort of band. And one of the things that I will do with it often play them simultaneously together. One of my favorite sounds. So I love making this sound, so I have them right next to each other. Ta-da! So this glockenspiel, fun story. This is a glockenspiel that was, This is a glockenspiel that was like a school glockenspiel, like an educational one, and I had a ton of these at my old job, and I was told to get rid of them, and I just found the best one and I took it. And I found a few others and I gave them to people. And if you're familiar with Pomplamoose, the YouTube band, they have one and they've used it in a handful of videos. They still have it as far as I know. I've seen it around. I'm fairly confident I saw it in Jack's studio the last time he did a studio tour. The toy piano is a Jmar toy piano that I've had for ages. I have installed a pickup in it that I designed. They run into a tiny mixer that's hiding under here, and from that mixer, they run into a line selector just so I can turn it on and off. And that's also related to the secret final island, which we'll get to. And it runs into a micro Pog, which is down here, Pog, and a Boss RV6. And that gives me some shimmery effects, and it gives me, that's actually what, there's a mic underneath here, and then there's the pickup in here, and so all of that runs through the shimmery effect. Now, in addition to that, we have a continued mallet percussion situation with the vibraphone over here. Now, the vibraphone has a bunch of stuff going on in addition to being mic'd on its own accord down below. We also have this, which is plugged into nothing because I stepped on the cable. We have this, which is plugged into the same mixer that the glockenspiel and the toy piano are plugged into. This is where it gets a little complicated. This is a guitar pickup in a block of wood. And hitting it does nothing, but and so this island is sort of the Shimmer Island, right? It allows me to do all of these sort of like shiny sounds, these like decorative sounds that kind of go over the top of the other instruments. I have multiple options for those kinds of effects. I also have a bow for the vibraphone and other mallet options and stuff like that. So we have our sort of first island, our sort of second island. You can kind of rope the guitar set up into that. And then we have our third island, which is the Shimmer Island, that kind of goes around here. And the relationship between all these instruments is sort of their function. This is like a core songwriting, singing sort of station. This is like a synthesizer, rhythmic bed sort of station. You could rope the bass guitar into that station, I suppose. And then we have this one over here. And in addition to that, we have probably the most visually obvious station in the room, although you can't see it. I just realized. There's my drum set. And the drum set is a drum set. It is very straightforward, but this is where we start to take the islands and tie them all back into each other. On the ground, I have all kinds of stuff hiding. I have different kinds of sticks, and I have brushes, and I have these guys, which I can use to play them and each other. I have all kinds of metal junk that I've collected over the years that make nice sounds when you hit them or when you bow them. And it all just kind of lives on the ground underneath the drums so that I have it available at a moment's notice. The drums are mic'd a little bit haphazardly. There's a kick mic, there's a snare mic, and there's a single overhead mic, which is just out of frame. I have a button. There's a button down there. And when I press that button, if you watch the 505, you can see that it starts recording on channel 5. You can see that it starts recording. Now it records everything, not just the drums. But it allows me to get a groove going and then play drums over it easily. I don't know why. Okay, there we go. That button is connected back to the Behringer controller on the floor here to set off that particular channel. The idea of having the foot controller over here and the thing all the way over there, obviously, is so that while I'm here playing a song, I can control the looper effectively. I have a start and stop. So that concept, or while I'm playing guitar or playing trombone or all these other things that are over here, and then I have the basic ability from the other side of the room to control channel 5 of the looper as well. Any questions so far? A lot of this is technical explanation, so I hope that I've made clear why I've grouped instruments the way that I have. The drum set thing is kind of obvious, right? But like the grouping of the synthesizer and the drum machine and like the bass guitar and the guitar and the grouping of these things and the grouping of all the mallet percussion and the toy piano, each of those has like its own flavor, its own sort of like a family concept to me in my mind. Obviously, the microphone itself, you could potentially call its own island. There's a whole world of stuff in there. All my other instruments, the trombone, I have a baritone horn. All of those things relate to the audience through the microphone, and therefore through all the effects that the microphone is plugged into. But and I show you the inputs on the back of the 505 and how sort of chaotic they are to emphasize that like I've really kind of had to go to great lengths to make some of these relationships work the way that they make sense to me as a human. The technical side of like what the gear is willing to do doesn't always match my needs musically, and sort of forces me to jump through some hoops to make things work. Like I was explaining, the microphone goes in to the 505 where it's recorded, and then it goes back out and it comes through the effects and then back into the 505 where it's not recorded, so that I'm able to do stuff with these effects and have it not impact what I'm recording on the thing. And that relates to the secret 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th island. The secret 5th island is the room itself. when I have, so I mentioned that on the Plinky vibraphone Glockenspiel Island, I have this switch to turn the microphone off and on. If I turn it on, and actually, am I not getting? Yeah, the microphone is like not having it today. Well, I don't know what happened, but when I turn this on, normally I get the shimmery effects on anything I do in the room. And so I can make intentional decisions to play the drums with those effects on. I guess just to wrap it up, the relationships between each instrument create one like meta instrument. And when I'm improvising, I can lean on those interactions and that family of things in order to make something happen. Thank you everybody for hanging out and chatting, hearing me chat. And this is really fun. Appreciate this opportunity to talk about this stuff. It's been kind of bouncing around in my brain a lot, and it took, a while. My early setups were really chaotic and just didn't make a lot of sense. So thank you to the Golden Shrimp Guild and everybody involved for setting up this really cool event. Peace.